Hey my good friend, Sam Haymart with Test Driven TV. Today we're looking at the 2021 Ford Ranger Tremor, the new top-end off-road edition for Ranger. So we're out here in the desert, obviously, so we can take it for a drive out here. I'm going to show it to you inside and out, and then I'm going to tell you what I really think. All right, my friends, before we get out on the test drive, let's start right up front and talk about all the different things that make this a different looking and a differently equipped Ford Ranger. The Tremor adds a lot of hardware, and we'll get to that here in a minute, but the visuals start right up front with that grille. Look at that. Got some nice red accents in it. It's a unique design. You can see there's tow hooks there, of course, LED headlights, LED fog lights, a bash plate down underneath. Now this has a full battery of skid plates, but additionally here is also a pretty robust bash plate at the front. A little bit more than you're going to get on the FX4. Coming around the corner, unique 17-inch wheels and some huge 32-inch off-road tires, and they definitely stick out just a little bit, and because of that there are fender lip moldings which are actually an extra ½ inch thick, adding a total of 1 inch to the width of this truck. Those are colored in magnetic, and they really offset nicely with the cyber orange paint that you see here. This is an option, of course. They call it cyber orange, but it's really kind of a yellow, I think. Coming down the side, now this also has some unique running boards that have what they call off-road hoops. And I will complain about these just a little bit because I've actually found a few times when I've gotten out of the truck, I've scraped my shin on these things. They stick out quite a bit, which is helpful on one hand, but if you're not careful getting in and out, especially if you're wearing shorts like I am, I've got scrapes on the back of my calves. When we get to the cargo box, you'll find that this is an all-steel box, unlike Toyota, which has a plastic composite box. There is a spray-in bed liner here, and this does have LED tail lamps to boot. Looking under that rear bed, you'll find this actually has a full-size spare. It is mounted to a steel wheel, but it is a full-size spare that matches these tires. Very cool. The interior of the Ranger has been a place that I've said good things about in the past. This is one of the better interiors from Ford, and that goes to the quality of the materials all around and the fact that a lot of the quality of these materials is consistent from one piece to the other. That's the thing that I've usually criticized Fords for in the past, is having cheap things next to expensive things. Here we've got a good consistency of quality, from the switchgear to the plastics to the materials to the finishes. Everything works really well, and so we have quite a few things to point out that I think are worthy for you to see. And the first thing we'll look at are these seats. These are some beautiful Mico suede leather seats with the Tremor logos right in there. They're very comfortable. Here they're power adjustable. I think they're some of the more comfortable seats that Ford does offer. They offer a lot of side support, and you can get the height just where you want it so that you've got good visibility and a comfortable driving position overall. Notable here on the Tremor is this pod of auxiliary switches up on top of the dash. This allows you to put LED lights, all sorts of other accessories on this truck, and you don't have to go fishing wires here and there and trying to figure out a way to switch them. There's actually a fuse block under the hood specifically for this, and allows you to connect all your wires up there, and there are fuses already set up for it. Sitting here looking forward, this is a leather-wrapped steering wheel. No paddle shifters here. But there are quite a few controls for all of the features this truck has, and the instrument cluster has 2 digital screens right and left, sort of a design that's been around for Ford, with a single dial in the middle. Both of those screens on the side are customizable to put whatever you like on there. Center stack, very simple. Some of the radio heart controls are right on top, climate control and HVAC down below, USB ports down on the bottom. There's a place for your phone and a nice deep bin cubby there, controls for the drive modes and various traction toys here, and a traditional lever shifter, which is always my favorite. They've located the cup holders here in the console so that they can be there with tall cups, and it doesn't necessarily interfere with your driving behavior with your switches and levers. And storage here is actually pretty good. This is a storage box that's nice and deep. I would say a little bit larger than a square Kleenex box. Just one though. One other feature this has that I really like are these all-weather floor mats. These rubber mats are totally cool. Now this comes with also the carpeted mats, but this is an accessory you can get from Ford outside of just the Tremor package, but I totally love these things. You can pull them out and hose them off, and made me feel a lot better about going out in the desert and getting dirty today. The back seat of the Ranger is a place that I sat in before the last time we did our review, and just like then, what I will say is that there's a generous amount of space back here. As you can see, these seats set for my height about 5'8" to 5'9", depending on what I'm wearing for footwear. The thing I have to complain about back here is the seating height. It sits down a little bit low. As you can see, my knees are perched up in a bit of an unnatural position. I feel like I'm kind of scrunched in here, and oddly enough, I just sat in the back of a Maverick last week, a smaller truck, and it actually has a more comfortable, naturally seated position in the back. A little bit strange there, but nonetheless, this seat, the bottom does fold upward to allow access to storage down below, and you can configure that in a different way or two. It's a nice little deal. This does have a fold-down armrest with cup holders in it, at least in this particular trim grade, and the center console does have 2 USB ports, and in this particular truck also an AC outlet. Notably missing here at any trim grade are HVAC vents, and that's something that's always very important to me here in Arizona. It's 106 degrees this afternoon as I sit here filming this. That's why I've got the truck on and the air conditioner on, if you can hear that. Overall, this interior is very impressive. I said that in 2019 when I reviewed this truck. The material quality, the fit and finish. I really do think this is one of the best interiors in the mid-size pickup truck class right now. It just really fires on all cylinders. Ford's done a good job here. They really have. You can tell that they went to the extra mile to make it nice. So this interior gets 4.5 out of 5 stars. This infotainment system is the top of the line with the B&O sound system. It is the Sync 3 touchscreen. It has hard controls, tuning, volume, and a few other things that you're going to commonly use. It has a good sound quality. The menus are well laid out. You can switch this to dark graphics. Right now it's set for white light graphics, which means it's kind of hard for you to see on the screen. But driving around, I like it this way. The nav works very well. It has all of the voice activated controls, Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, but not wireless yet. And the one thing that is missing here at this price range is a 360-degree camera view. It does have a backup camera that does have the lines that turn with your steering, but not quite all the way there on the technology. Overall, though, it is impressive, and I have talked very nicely about this system in the past. It does work very well in most vehicles I've tested in. This infotainment system gets 4.5 out of 5 stars. All right, my friends, let's get out here for a drive on my favorite trail. Whew. Now, this isn't necessarily hardcore off-roading like this truck's capable of, but it's a great way to test what really makes this truck special, and that is the Fox Shocks suspension. This has monotube front shocks, coilover design, supplied by Fox, and in the rear it's got external reservoir Fox shocks along with multi-leaf springs. The increased suspension travel is a result of that, and a special design lower suspension knuckle that gives us 6.5 inches suspension travel at the front, 8.1 inches at the rear, and with the larger tires, a total of 9.7 inches ground clearance. Now those are all great specs. The approach, departure, breakover angles are all better too. Woo! But what I have found so great about the suspension is the fact that it rides so much nicer off-road. It's got better control. This is a very maneuverable truck because of its size. It's got a solid frame. It's well isolated from a lot of those rough bumps that I've been going over, and with these larger tires, this is just a nice rubbery off-road feeling truck. It handles really nicely out there in the stuff, and using all of these systems, it's actually quite intuitive. The trail control system is essentially a low-speed cruise control, but that's oversimplifying it. It's a lot more than that. It essentially allows you to turn it on. Using the buttons on the steering wheel, you can set a speed up to 10 miles an hour in 4 low and 20 miles an hour in 4 high, and that allows you to set a speed, and it will control the throttle and the braking and the traction control and all of that, and you can concentrate on steering. The rear locking differential is another feature that this has, and it's controllable on a button down on the lower console, and you see an icon light up, and that allows you to lock the rear axle on demand. And while that's not always important, if you're really hardcore off-roading and you get to a spot where, say, one of those rear wheels is hanging in the air, it's a nice thing to have to lock that rear axle and push your way through challenging situations, especially when you get a high center situation. And in using things like the trail control, it also controls your downhill descents. Much like hill descent control, only it's all included in the system. So again, you have a set speed, you can simply control steering, it handles the brakes, the throttle, traction control, everything else. So now it's time to take this out on the desert washboard road. Because all-out off-roading is fun, but if this thing feels like a POS just driving it on a gravel road, why, none of that stuff matters. So the desert washboard road is a place I always love to test a truck and see how it really drives. See how well bolted together it is, how well isolated is the suspension, how well built is the body structure, does the interior rattle? Well, I'm happy to tell you that out here, sailing along on this washboard surface, this thing feels solid as a brick. Very rubberized, very isolated from the vibrations. I'm not getting any shuddering in the structure, no rattling in the suspension, no kickback in the steering. This thing is just gliding along like a magic carpet out here. I'm very impressed. And that goes again to these tall sidewall off-road tires. It goes to a well-sorted suspension, and even the traction control and the stability control on this thing is set up for off-roading, which when you throw it into a corner, it allows a little bit of slide before it kicks in, but it kicks in. It does a good job of keeping this thing under control on this slippery, gravelly surface. So honestly, I gotta tell you, this is one of the best experiences I've had in a Ford pickup out here on this desert washboard road, because some of the larger trucks don't feel so good. This has got it nailed. But the reality is well, most buyers, they're gonna buy it for the looks, and how it drives on the pavement is really what's gonna matter. Out here in the real world, for most people on the pavement, I really wanted to find out a few things about how this truck handles, because trucks with off-road suspensions sometimes handle very well on the pavement and around town in real life, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're sprung too softly and they don't handle well around curves, or they don't feel stable at speed. The other thing I wanted to find out is how did they tune the suspension on this, because the last time I test drove the Ranger, a Lariat FX4, I found that way too much float was tuned into the suspension. The first thing I'll talk about is the fact that out here on this pretty noisy road, because of the pavement service, it's a very quiet ride, it's very stable. These shocks have a pretty good tune for keeping this truck feeling pretty solid and predictable. Now, yes, it does have a slightly slow response when it comes to movements. You want that for off-road, and so when you do this with the steering, you kind of get this fishing boat kind of thing, but like when you do throw it into a corner, it still has enough grab to make you feel confident this thing isn't going to fly off into the distance. So they've done a good job in making this a pretty good compromise between the stiffness and control you need on the pavement and the soft sort of forgiveness that you need off the pavement. And yet they've done it with getting rid of that float that I didn't find so appealing in the FX4. So this thing really handles quite well. So it's quiet, it's stable, it feels very refined. This is a chassis that gets 5 out of 5 stars for a truck. Yeah. And lastly, now it's time to talk about what's under the hood and how does this thing go down the road. Under the hood here, like all Rangers, 2.3 liter EcoBoost 4-cylinder turbocharged engine, and it comes mated to Ford's 10-speed automatic transmission. Now, how does it go? So I'm out here on a deserted highway, I've come to a stop and flooring it. And 60. So 270 horsepower, 310 pound-feet of torque. It's not the most horsepower in class, it's not the least. What I will say is that this 10-speed automatic transmission does make the most of it. The one thing you did notice back there is a little bit of lag off the line, and that's two things, like we talked about last time I test drove this truck. There's turbo lag, of course, but really more than anything, it is the lag from the drive-by-wire throttle. And the air conditioner is always on right now here in Phoenix, and so that probably does contribute to maybe a little bit less power from a standstill. It's 100 and God knows what out there today. This is an engine that is a little bit coarse and noisy under full acceleration. You do know it's a 4-cylinder, doesn't quite have that smooth refinement that you get with V6s and some of the other competitors. The Chevrolet Colorado, that's a very nice V6. Toyota's V6 is okay, but it's still not the best one out there. Horsepower, right in the same neighborhood, but doesn't have nearly the torque this does. So it's a very competitive powertrain. Now it's rated by the EPA at 19 mpg city, 19 mpg highway, and 19 mpg combined. That is a deficit from the rest of the Rangers, and that's because of this off-road package. That really does impact the mpg. Cattle guard. Bigger tires, bigger wheels, lower mpg. But I did get 20 with it this week. If I were a truck buyer, the fact that it isn't a V6 wouldn't be a deal killer at all. This powertrain gets 4.5 out of 5 stars. All right, my friends, let's talk about value, because that is the last thing we talk about before we give this thing a final score. And so when I look at value, the first thing we talk about is a price tag, $47,000 and some change as tested. Now, there's more money to spend here. There are some options that this doesn't have. And you can get it for a lot less if you go with the XLT instead of the Lariat, and you don't put some of the extra options on, just the Tremor package. You can get down closer to, you know, the low 40s. So this is a truck that's sort of in the middle range of where you're going to spend on the Tremor. Now, when we look at the competition, things like the Toyota Tacoma TRD-Pro or the Chevrolet ZR2 in the Colorado, I think we're pretty much on par with the Tacoma in terms of hardware and capability. The interior, much better than the Tacoma. It's got a lot more features, it's got a lot more content, definitely a lot more quality, and it's more comfortable. It's just a whole nother world in there compared to the Toyota. If we look at the Chevrolet ZR2, we're a little closer on the interior, but the ZR2 has so much more in the way of hardware. It's got the front locker, it's got a really honestly more robust suspension, it's got rock rails, it's got a lot of things that this doesn't quite have. Plus you can order the diesel, and if you go with the stock engine, it's a V6 with even more power. So ZR2 I think is just a step up, but it costs more. So you can spend well into the mid 50s on the ZR2, even higher if the dealer wants more. You know, it's kind of one of those things. So when I think about value here, I look at competitiveness, I look at quality. Warranty coverage is class average, I'd say. And the quality though, very good. I'm impressed with the quality, fit and finish here. The Ranger has been a standout even on the last one I tested. So I put value at 5 out of 5 stars. Exceptional. And when you put that in with everything we've already talked about, we're at 4.5 out of 5 stars total. And I like it enough that I would buy it. Yeah, if I were looking for a midsize off-road themed truck, this is the one I'd get. Now, I like the competitors, but I think this is the best all-around package, quality, interior, livability, comfort, and it's just nice to drive. So there you go. If you like the review you just saw, click right here, see my latest one, or better yet, click down there and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Either way, stay tuned.